Easter-themed projects would not be complete without an Easter basket. Made from felt, perfect for hunting Easter eggs or becoming a beautiful display on your kitchen table. Let's get started. From the felt materials kit from Cricut, you'll need the blue felt, it's sort of aqua blue. You'll need a sheet of the green felt, this is the light green. You'll need your hot pink felt and your peach felt. Now, I've already used both of these and I've said to save the scraps as we were going. So here is where we're going to be using our scraps from our beautiful sheets of felt. You're also going to need some DMC floss. If you do embroidery or you have sewing floss, you're going to need something rather thick to sew the basket together. You're going to need a large needle and some cute little beads from your craft cabinet. You're also going to need your fabric grip cutting mat that came with the Cricut Maker. Launch Design Space on whatever device you're going to use to run the Cricut Maker. I'm using the iPad, but you can use your computer, you can use your laptop and your phone. Select New Project and add an image at the bottom on the iPad app. You want to go to Cartridges and search Make Something You Love. Select Make Something You Love felt material kit and then select the project with the green bands. Insert the project on the mat. Click Make It and we're ready to cut our first cut. The first mat is our blue felt. You want to add it to the mat with even pressure. Click Continue. And the Maker and Design Space is going to ask you what material you want to cut. Because you have many choices, thousands of materials with the Maker, you want to select all materials and type in felt. Make sure and select the felt with the little C next to it, which means it's for Cricut felt, and you'll be ready to cut. The machine is calling for the fine tip blade in clamp B, which is already loaded in the machine. You press the blinking C button for the machine to cut, and it will detect the blade and start cutting the project. When you're removing the felt from the mat, you definitely want to be careful but deliberate in doing so. The felt has little tabs. You see how it actually doesn't let go completely. So you separate those little areas as you're taking the material away. You definitely want to save your scraps. The next mat that it's called for is the peach. And you'll notice that I'm using a piece of felt that I've already used before. I'm putting the pre-cuts at the bottom so I have plenty of room at the top to cut the flowers. If you wanted to, you can select each one of these images and move it around on the mat so that you can conserve your materials. When removing the mat, you see our beautiful little flowers are already cut, but again, there's left in the material. So don't be shy about pulling it apart, but also don't be too forceful. Just separate it as if you were delicately removing an actual flower petal. The next mat is the green felt, and these are for the sides and the center of the basket. Load the mat. You press the button, and the Cricut Maker does all the hard work. Once again, when you're removing the felt, here we have many large pieces and a lot of small holes. And you see how the material gives as it's coming off the mat? That's what we call die cutting. You want to be very gentle about taking the pieces away from the sides once it's been cut. So you have two sides and a handle from this one large sheet of felt. You get two in the kit, so this will be, you're using the entire piece just for this basket of one of them. Again, weeding out the little holes that have been cut very gently and set aside for assembly. The last mat is your hot pink felt, and you'll notice that we need about 2.5 inches worth of material to cut. So I'm going to cut right up here. Let me show you that on the iPad. Everything's positioned straight away right here. So if you wanted to move these around, you would select them and move them around. But we're conserving material. So load it in the machine and it's going to cut precisely where I want it to. As you unload the mat for the final time, you have all kinds of great things that have been cut with the Cricut Maker and the felt. Let's assemble this Easter basket. You're going to need some basic sewing skills, but this is a really great project to do with your kids or your grandkids. All right, I'm going to start with a little floss. This is an embroidery floss. It just needs the full thickness of a DMC type thread. I'm using a contrasting color so that it shows up on the edges. And I'm going to first take the two sides of the basket and assemble them together. What's really important is to line up the holes and note that we're going to start one hole in, all right? So if you are someone that's accustomed to sewing, I'm gonna actually, I'm using a tapestry needle. So instead of actually putting the thread through the material, I'm just going to loop it around and make my knot. In a way, I know you can't see this, but I'm just going to make a knot in the right there instead of putting the big needle through the tiny felt. So you see how I've anchored the thread across one of the holes. So we've skipped the first one because that's for the base, and then the side is going to start here. Now you overlap the two pieces and just use a basic running stitch on the inside and the outside. So easy peasy. And when you get to the top, we want to turn it around, and we want to do it in the opposite direction. And the reason that is because you see your stitches. See how nice and neat that ends up. So now that's the first edge, and we want the front and the back to look identical. You'll send the thread back through and then again make another knot to secure the end. And trim with your Cricut scissors. This is the interior of my basket. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Again, starting here in the running stitch and connect both sides. To assemble the basket and the base, we're going to use a simple running stitch to connect the two. And what's fun about this is that it's a very simple process of a stitch, and it's great to do with your grandkids or someone that you're teaching to sew because it's just a simple start and it's fun. I learned how to sew at age 7. I was in the 4-H of my little town, and what was really important about sewing at that time was working on a machine. So we didn't do any of this hand stitching until my grandmother taught me how. So a blanket stitch is you're going to take one of the holes from the basket, go up through the base of the the basket, and then keep your thread ahead of you every time and connect the two holes every time. So this is really good for a lefty. You can see how I'm keeping the thread on the back of the needle and ahead of my stitch. Now you'll continue this until the entire base is connected to the basket. Again, you want to go through that very last stitch so everything looks as good on the outside as it does on the inside. So your knot's going to be made on the inside of the bottom of the basket. The handle for each side of the basket is done the same way with just a straight stitch and 2 knots, and you can secure it on the back as well. Do this on both sides of the basket handle so that you have a wonderful vessel that's ready to be filled. But before we do that, we do have to add just a little bit of decoration. So we've already cut our felt flowers with the Cricut Maker, and each one of these is assembled in the same way. I'm going to use a little hot glue on the center of the flower. I'm going to turn the petals so that the flower looks more full. And the last layer gets just a little more glue. And the flower in the center. Now definitely remove all these little glue strings. There is such a thing as felt glue if you have some. And fabric glue works as well. Now that is pretty like it is, but we're going to add a few little beads to the center of this. My beads today actually could be strung with a piece of thread, but you can actually keep sewing or again use a little hot glue. And make a little triangle with them so it looks like the cluster of an actual flower stamen. Hold those in place, and that gives you the perfect little embellishment. Now the sides of the basket are where the seam is, and we're going to cover that up. Now if you still have out your thread, I would definitely sew the last layer onto this basket, but for the sake of time in this video, we're just going to use hot glue, apply it to the side of the basket, no sewing. We tried to make all of our Cricut Maker projects for felt as no sew as possible. We have just a little bit of sewing. This is a really fun project. That's a delightful way to spend an afternoon making your brand new Easter basket. It's as pretty as spring itself, and it's beautiful in the making.